Did you know that one of the biggest obstacles to the change or transformation we want to experience is the attachment to who we think we are? Or said differently, our identity? Our identity is how we define ourselves and as a result informs our expectations, assumptions, and rules about the way things should be. It very much can limit or expand our experience of life. Today we're discussing the attachment to identity, what that can look like, how it limits us, and how our experience can radically change as we release this unhelpful attachment. And after the discussion, we get to the most important part of this episode. The group frequency calibration associated with this episode is where the frequency work happens and where change actually occurs. So be sure to listen to that. Without releasing distortion patterns targeted by the GFC, the change you want will be more difficult to attain because you haven't addressed the root of the issue. If you like this episode, please hit the like button and share with a friend. My name is Karen Cheong, and today in Mastering Your World Through Frequencies, we're discussing identity, the invisible force that holds you back.
So we're going to talk about identity and attachment to it today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'd really like to define identity because I was in a situation recently and I thought we were going to have a discussion about identity and attachment to it and how we let it go. And I understood halfway through the conversation that my idea of identity was quite different from this group's idea of what identity was. And the general consensus in the group was it was your culture, where you were born, your name, your family.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding of identity is that it's a persona that we project into the world, and we want people to reinforce and believe that persona. I mean, can you explain it and what identity really is?
Yeah.
And how that impacts the resonance, the frequency resonance of us as individuals.
Yeah. Okay, so the two big questions, but I'll do my best. So for me, from my perspective, identity is the result of a number of things going on at the same time. So it's multi-layered. So one is it is a projection of who you think you are. So meaning what you like, what you expect, what you assume, what you conclude, all that stuff is wrapped up in what you think you are, and therefore how others should behave in response to you, or how the world's experience should be as a result of who you are, okay? And on top of that, it's also a result of a number of distortion patterns that are coming through from your culture, your religion, your lineage, that reinforce a certain persona based on those distortions. So for example, what I mean by that is, let's imagine you have a lineage that has been Catholic in the past, okay? Because you're Irish, let's just imagine, right? And so there's a long lineage, or French, and you have a long lineage that are Catholics. But you today aren't a practicing Catholic. You weren't really brought up within, going to church every Sunday and that type of thing. So you're not really associated with that religion anymore. But there are certain pieces of it that still impact you. Like, for example, you still have, a hypersensitivity to guilt and feeling ashamed that tends to be within that religious context, okay? And also non-deserving, okay? So all those things are wrapped up in those distortion patterns that come through from culture and also religion and impact who you think you are, even though you no longer practice that religion. You're not like associating only with, for example, Irish people anymore. You associate with all kinds of people. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, kind of.
Okay.
Because the only question I have then is, how is the guilt part of the identity?
Right. So the guilt is part of the identity because, to me, identity is when a distortion pattern becomes entrenched into who you think you are and how you behave in the world, how you perceive the world, and how you perceive yourself. So it becomes like a fixed entity or identity that you think is solid, and therefore through which you view the world and which you believe the world should view you through.
So if I try to take what you've said and make it in a way that I can kind of understand, maybe you can correct me, right?
Yeah.
So if I have this distortion pattern in my lineage because of this Catholic identity, and guilt is part of that. So I approach the world with this
Layer of guilt.
always as a driving force.
Yeah.
Either I'm running from guilt or I'm doing things to make folk feel guilty.
Correct. Yes.
Okay,
So
okay,
someone
got you.
does something nice, like for example, someone does something nice for you, okay? And it's out of the blue and you don't expect it. So now you feel a little bit bad because you're like, oh, well, shoot, I don't have anything to give them back, right? Now I've got to think about like, next time I see them, I have to either give them a compliment or maybe have a nice little gift for them, or I need to make them something, or I have to be more considerate. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, because you have this running through your identity, this is who you think you are now going to respond to that situation in a very specific way. So let's just imagine someone who doesn't have that pattern running through them. They would just receive it. Thank you so much, that's so kind of you. Whatever would ensue because of that. But it's a very different pattern or behavioral response, even emotional response, thought response, because of who you think you are.
Right. Yeah, I've got it. So it's like a filter as
Yeah,
well.
it's totally a filter. So for example, another thing, just to extrapolate on that. So for example, for my mom, she always feels like she has to buy gifts for the people she loves
Oh, yeah.
when she goes somewhere. That's part of her identity. So meaning that the way that she shows love is through gift giving. That's part of her identity. So if she doesn't give a gift, it's like something's wrong. You know what I mean? It's not who she is in the world.
Okay. So how is that different from, like, you really want to give a gift? How is that different? Like, how do I recognize in me, is this just an identity filter that I'm running, that, you know, that I've always run and I feel like I should always do it, to, I really want to buy this gift for this person because I feel good buying this gift for this person?
Well, I think it's in just what you just said. It's like, you have to, you should, because if you don't, then there's something that doesn't, you know what I mean? There's something wrong. Like you're not meeting a certain internal expectation or what you feel is appropriate. Whereas the second example where you're like, oh, I'm super, like, I see this glass and I'm like, Fiona would love this glass. This is amazing.
Yeah.
It's exactly the color, the shape, everything that she wants. Then you're like, I buy it and I give it to you. But that's in the moment. It's in response to the thing, and I'm now thinking of you, and I think, I'm gonna give it to you. But I don't feel like, okay, because I'm in this space, I'm visiting Mexico for the first time, I have to see Fiona when I go home. Shoot, if I don't bring her something, then I've not failed, but you know what I mean? Something feels off.
Yeah.
Like I haven't fulfilled like some kind of obligation within me to do it. So now I feel bad when I see you and I haven't brought you this thing.
Okay, so thanks for spelling that out. So part of it is kind of habituation, and part of it, I wonder as well, is this expectation building.
Yes.
So you've done it once and twice and three times, and now you're kind of bound into this expectation now.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you know, this is how it should be because
Yes.
that's how it's always been, and
Yes.
this is who I am.
Yes. So expectation and what I call rule set are things that are fundamentally part of identity, where, like you said, you expect things to be a certain way. You expect people to behave in a certain way. You expect yourself to behave in a certain way. And there are certain rule sets. So if people violate what you expect, then there's a response. So I might have the rule set that if you are late, then that is rude, okay? So I'm never late. It's actually not true, by the way, but I'm never late, okay? Because the rule set is it's rude if I'm late. So when other people are late, I'm like, whoa, it violates my rule set because it's disrespectful to me. You know, my time's important. Don't they know that? Why are they not fulfilling their obligation when we agreed on a certain time? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm not getting riled up. My rule set's being violated. Right? So that's what I mean by it's part of identity. So expectations, rule sets, also assumptions, right, are part of identity. So I assume, for example, an assumption could be something like, I assume that, and it can overlap with expectation, but that people should act with a certain degree of kindness. Or not should, but will act with that. And so when they start saying malicious things, for example, it's shocking to me because I assume that people will act in a certain way.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, whoa, what's happening? And we can really get thrown off center because we assume that the world is a certain way. And when it's not, because of this filter of identity, we get kind of like off center and off put and kind of riled up. It violates our sense of like who we are and the way, as a result, the world should be.
Wow, this is taking a turn a lot different from where I thought it was going to go. Okay, so, because I'm sitting here now listening to you and I'm thinking, but shouldn't there be certain situations where we should have respect and behave in a certain way, or is that just my identity?
Yeah, it's part of your filters of the way you think world should be. So here's the thing. It's a funny thing, you know. There is also, so what you're talking about is filters, and then there is what I would call like a higher degree of resonance of the best case scenario in an outcome in terms of relationship, circumstance, and what fulfills the higher good.
Yeah.
So if you are of a high enough resonance or a high enough vibrational level, you will be aware of what serves the highest good in terms of raising the frequency level of everything, or the vibrational level of everything.
Yeah.
Which means that people, because when they feel good, tend to vibrate higher.
Yeah.
It's an outcome which serves everything and everyone. That's a vibrational level thing. That's not a filter. I'm trying to distinguish.
All right.
So one is, like, if you can sense that, that's not identity. That's just not conforming, but feeling what serves the highest good.
Yeah.
You may also have an identity which says that people should be good people.
Got you.
Do you see what I'm saying? To me, there's a difference.
So if you're hearing words like should, must, why didn't they?
Yeah.
You know, things like that,
That's
as opposed to when I'm in the higher resonating field of myself, then I can simply allow what's happening and just maintain that field.
Yeah.
I have authority in my field, hold my zero, and lo and behold, it tends to come into balance, the environment around me.
Yes.
Okay.
And what you say and what you do will be in congruence with that higher field. You're feeling that higher resonance of the greater good, of the higher vibrating field. So because you're feeling that, and because you have a high enough resonance, you're aware of it, you'll want to act and say and do things that help to buoy that up because it feels good, right? So that would be being kind, or being generous, or being whatever, because now it's like it's like plumping up the vibrational level of everything, and so it amplifies.
Yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to relate it to identity and attachment to identity.
Yes.
I think that's what happens to me because I really want to understand how to let go certain aspects. So I understand that there is an identity required somewhere.
Of course.
You have to kind of know who you are in this human body. Being human is an identity.
Absolutely.
Right? But it's how, like you say, functioning within an identity that is of a higher resonating frequency and can adapt and pivot to
exactly.
suit, right?
So what I think the key is what you were just saying, the attachment to the identity. So when the identity is super rigid, okay, and because you're super rigid in an identity, your perspective is fixed, meaning like, this is the way the world should be. This is the way I am in the world.
Yeah.
It's kind of a funny thing. So because so identity, as you said, in itself is not an issue. It's our attachment to it and not wanting any kind of malleability and like sticking behind that identity. That's the problem, right? This is like, I'm right, you're wrong.
And even for self-preservation, like I've seen people hang on to a certain identity. I guess we could swap at this level of talking about identity to persona.
Yeah.
Right? And they hang on to it even if it's hurting them physically,
for
emotionally,
sure.
and mentally because they need to be seen as this
type of person.
Particular identity.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so what you're saying is we can have an identity if it nurtures us and helps us buoy to a higher frequency, and then that's the best version of identity.
Yes.
And then you've got the lower version of identity, which is this persona catching, hanging on to projection kind of a thing.
And just as an example of that, so just to help people understand what that means.
Yeah.
So we used to have this friend who was very, very smart. Okay, so she's very smart, very pulled together, could make decisions quickly, extraordinarily organized. So like this. Okay, so her life was like very successful. Okay, her identity was on decisiveness, being quick, and being that organized. So do you see her success created her persona, her identity, where it was like, so it didn't really matter what was presented in front of her. She always had to be the same, meaning she had to make her decisions quickly. She had to be very rapid. She had to be very decisive. Very she was always the same. And in a way, because the identity became rigid, it started to distort. So it became meaning for her, she would become dismissive. Right? Because here she is being quick and decisive and blah, blah, blah. And as it fed her identity of this is who I am, and she was rewarded for this is who I am, it started to distort. So now that decisiveness becomes a little bit arrogant, dismissive, too fast, not soft in any way, not allowing for collaboration. So it also, part of her identity was that no one does it better than me because I do it the best. So what also happens? She's freaking tired.
I was just going to say the adverse effect of that is what happens when she is tired and not fast? What does it do internally for her?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's it drives her into a certain speed and a certain level of having to deliver, and she's always on. There's no rest because her identity is in achievement, getting things done, getting it done fast and well. So do you see? In her identity, there's no room for taking a break. Yeah. And even when she's on vacation, she's fast, achieving a lot, doing all the cool things that are Instagram worthy, which is amazing. But do you see, there's no room for an other kind of experience, for any kind of softness, for rest, for introspection, for imagining, for creativity. Do you see? It's locked into a certain type of thing.
Yeah, and I'm wondering as you're talking, is that linked into having a low self-worth?
Yeah, for her it is. For her it is. That's why she was overachieving. But I think what you were saying is, what happens when you're attached to identity? Yeah. How does it limit? Well, in that example, it means that her experience is very limited to the perspective of that persona that she's created, that has given her success, that has fed her achievement, and given her a lot of financial remuneration as well. So, but what that means though, is that it also has harm because it doesn't allow her to be in the fullness of who she could be. In this particular case, this particular woman, I'm not saying everybody, but she's very in her masculine. So there's no room for softness. There's less room for collaboration, for just taking time to be with somebody. There is none of that in her world. There's not time, there's no value in being still. So there's less time for inspired creativity because that's not allowed in her world. Because of her identity, that's not good. It's not valuable. It's weak. It's a waste of time. Whatever it is, her attachment to the way she is and her identity makes it hard for her to experience that. And also, for this particular person, it also isolates her because not everybody wants to be with that. Some people do because it's kind of fun, she's always going to have something planned. It's always going to be a fun thing. She's always going to have it sorted. It's also hard to be with for all, you know what I mean? It's just whoa, it's kind of exhausting,
Yeah, I feel exhausted listening to it. I'm also hearing at the same time, I think what I'm hearing you say is, if you're so focused on this only, then you're missing out on all of this.
Yeah.
All the other stuff.
Yeah.
How many other aspects of you have you not tapped into?
Yeah.
Right? And how many other parts of your human identity that's available to you have you not played with yet? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. And you also lose out on other people's perspectives because you think that you're right. So when you have a really strong attachment to identity, the I'm right distortion, which is really strong in many of us, gets really amped up because I'm right is associated with identity.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? This is how the world should be. This is how I am. So therefore, as soon as you put an I am statement, I am fill in the blank, then it's really locked in. And now all of a sudden, anyone else's perspective is not, is often not right, which means that you lose out on the richness of different perspectives.
And people. Right? Because you block them off.
Yeah.
They don't fit into my idea of how the world should be.
Yeah.
So I'm never, ever going to meet that person.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, something amazing could come from meeting that person.
It's oh, they're too messy.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Well, they may be.
But they could be really fun.
They could be super fun and spontaneous and in flow. Magic happens around them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So.
And I'm also hearing, I'm wondering now in the background, when you say, anytime you put I am in front of something, I can hear some books that are out there. The Power of Positive Thinking.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, powerful or beautiful or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about that as part of the identity? Is that a useful tool, or is that something we should be mindful of when we use it?
Yeah, I think you need to be really mindful, because this is kind of where affirmations come from, right?
Yeah.
Like I am, and then you say a statement that you wish you were. The problem with affirmations is that if you are not internally congruent with them because you have a bunch of distortion patterns, what happens is it amplifies the distortion because it creates polarity in your system. You're saying, I am this. There's everything in your being is like, no, you're not.
Not yet, you're not.
I know you want to be, but that's not happening, right? Or whatever it is. So what happens is it creates, like I said, this polarity in your system where you have this strong desire to be other than what you are. It creates more resistance. And now at the same time, so you have this yearning, and then at the same time you have this knowing this is not true. It amplifies the distortion of like, that's not true. And why is it not true? Because you suck, because you don't have enough self-worth, because of what are all the list of all the crap that you are, right? It just amplifies that. So now you have this tremendous polarity in the field. So the thing is, it's like part of the affirmations can be powerful if you have a high enough resonance and you understand where your distortions are and what you need to release. Okay, it's sort of like, they can be like an anchor of like, I am, I don't know, wise. There's like, oh, I don't feel wise. Do you know what I mean? It's like a good reflector.
Yes.
It's like a reflection.
Like a tool.
Yeah,
almost.
exactly. It's like, do I feel wise? No, actually, I don't feel that wise. Huh. What does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, why don't I feel wise? It's, to me, those statements are helpful to show you where you're not congruent.
Yeah, where you need to maybe do a little bit more work.
Yeah, where you need to release distortion. Yeah.
I want to come back to what you were saying, because I always kind of want to understand, why am I doing this, right? That's my kind of driving force. So if I'm trying to build an identity and project this persona or this identity and be this person and constantly driving to fulfill that, projection, is that a distortion in itself? Because underneath it all, why can't I just be who I am,
Exactly.
right? And be at peace with that.
Exactly. It is a distortion. And there's something that I call fundamental authenticity, which has to do with knowing who you are from a higher perspective, not from your brain. Like, I am Karen. I like chocolate. I also like to dance. You know what I mean? Or whatever. I have this like persona, right? That I think I am. So whatever it is, it's sort of like when you have that projection and you hold on to it, the attachment to it, that in itself is a distortion, because we are not allowing ourselves to be aware of the messy sort of around us.
Yeah.
And we're not connected to that higher version of self, okay? Which is like, well, actually, I am infinite indestructible consciousness. I can express in any number of ways.
Yeah.
I know who I am from that level. How I express is a human perspective, right? So it's like you don't allow yourself to be in that expansiveness of that possibility of what that expression could be.
Yeah.
So I do think that often for people, especially who are very strong in their identity and almost forceful about it, to me, that is a very strong distortion. I'm like, well, why can't you be just who you are without having to defend or prove or anything?
Yeah.
So fundamental authenticity is when you are aware of yourself from a higher order and you're okay with it, and it doesn't matter who you're with. So meaning, a lot of us will be different with our friends, or certain of our friends, and then different with others' friends, and then different with your mom and dad, and then different at work, and then different, right? So people will say—
That sounds exhausting.
No. And people are like, well, don't you have to be in order to adapt? No, you can be you. But the thing is, you need to have internal strength and clarity, enough clarity from your distortion to be like, I am okay being me, and this is the expression of who I am.
Yeah. I think there's a fine line between when you're in these different groups, you can be authentic with who you are. Maybe how you pitch your conversation has to be different.
Yes.
Because they don't understand the words you use, or your words are different from the words they would use, whatever, cultural lineage, or just the amount of experience you've had in doing inner work. You kind of have to gauge it, but you're still being authentically you. You're not going to deny who you are just to suit who they are.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's a really key distinction. Thank you for making that. So it's not, like you said, fundamentally you don't shift, but you're being respectful of the perspective that they hold, right? So that's another thing that happens when you're not attached to your own identity, is you can honor the perspective of someone else because you're not so attached to yours. Like, oh my God, it's being threatened. Now I have to like be in argument with you or conflict. It's actually, oh, that's your perspective. That's fascinating. So what do you think about this? How do you see this? What does this mean to you?
Yeah.
Right? Because now you can ask different questions and it comes from a place of curiosity because the sense of who you are is not threatened.
Yeah.
It comes from a higher place. It's not staked in, this is me, this is me, this is me, this is me, you know? So there's no threat in the same way.
I can relate to that in that if I'm feeling strong inside and it's authentic, it doesn't matter what anybody says.
Exactly.
That's how it's going to be for me, you know?
Yep.
It's like when my husband says, what do you think of these? When he's buying something, like, I don't know what to think of them. You're going to wear these. You have to know what you think of them, you know? And even if I put something on and he says, what is that? I'm like, I don't care. I like it.
I know, I'm the same way. It's funny. I'm the same way with my husband because it's funny. Because sometimes when I wear things and I'm trying things on, I'm playing.
Yeah.
Often when I try things on.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to particularly like it necessarily, right? So sometimes I'm like, what do you think of this? She's like, whoa. He's like, well, if you like it, then that's great. Which is really awesome. But it's kind of funny, you know. But it's fun to like play also with what you think even looks good on you. For example,
yeah.
like how you dress, how you do your hair, how you do your makeup, how you do your whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Because it's not going to change internally who I am.
No.
But I might as well figure out, oh, I've never tried this before. Does that feel good?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah.
You know?
It's totally fun. It's like a big costume box.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was an interesting delve into identity in areas that I never even saw it coming. So.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So if you have liked this episode, please give us a thumbs up and hit the like button or comment below. And if you'd like to do the work to help you gain more fundamental authenticity and to start to have identity from a higher level order and release who you think you are so you can have more fluidity and more fun in the world, then check out the associated GFC with this particular episode. We're about to start the Group Frequency Calibration, or GFC, where we actually do the frequency work and where change is catalyzed. To get to the GFC, click on the square that'll appear to the right or the link in the description below. It's time to bring in a new experience, a new consciousness, and a new world. Let's rise together.